You have a dating app on your phone right now. Maybe you're on it. Maybe you deleted it 3 times and reinstalled it twice. Maybe you have a carefully curated selection of photos where you look slightly better than you actually do. Ancient humans had none of this. No profile, no algorithm, no ghosting. Well, actually, the ghosting was just regular dying, which is worse. What they had instead was a system so different from ours that most people have never thought about it. And here's the uncomfortable part. It worked. For 100,000 years, it worked. Here's what you picture when you imagine ancient human courtship. A man hits a woman over the head with a club and drags her back to his cave. This image is so old, it's practically a fossil itself. It shows up in cartoons, in Halloween costumes, in jokes your grandparents still make. It is also almost entirely made up. Anthropologists have found no evidence that prehistoric mate selection looked anything like that. What they have found is considerably stranger, more complicated, and in some ways more interesting than anything happening on your phone right now. Let's start with the basics. Hunter-gatherer groups were small. We're talking 20 to 50 people traveling together as a band. Everyone knew everyone. You had grown up with most of the people your age. You had watched them eat, sleep, get sick, handle fear, fail at hunting, succeed at hunting, throw a tantrum over a bad route, and cry when someone died. By the time you were old enough to think about a partner, you already had years of real data on every candidate. No profile needed. No first date anxiety. You already knew if this person was kind under pressure. You already knew if they were lazy. You already knew if they panicked or stayed calm when something went wrong. Tinder gives you 6 photos and a sentence about loving tacos. The Hadza of Tanzania give you 5 years of watching someone actually live. But here's the first thing that surprises people. You probably couldn't marry anyone in your group. In most hunter-gatherer societies studied by anthropologists, there were strict rules about who you could and couldn't pair with. Cousins were often off-limits. People you'd grown up alongside were often off-limits. The incest taboo, the instinctive aversion to mating with close relatives, is one of the most universal features of human psychology ever documented. It shows up in virtually every human culture, regardless of geography, religion, or history. Which meant that if your group had 50 people, and you removed the ones who were too closely related, too old, too young, or already paired, you might have a very small selection.
Listen to me.
Sometimes you might have no obvious candidate at all. So what did you do? You went to the mixer. Hunter-gatherer bands didn't live in complete isolation. They had relationships with neighboring groups. They met at predictable intervals, at seasonal gathering sites, at water sources during dry seasons, at the kind of natural crossroads that kept appearing in the same place year after year. These gatherings weren't just about trade or information. They were explicitly social. They were where young people from different bands encountered each other, sometimes for the first time, in a context specifically designed for that purpose. Anthropologists who have studied surviving hunter-gatherer groups describe these gatherings in remarkably similar terms across radically different cultures. There's music, there's dancing, there's shared food. There's a kind of communal performance where individuals get to show what they're made of in front of potential partners from outside their usual group. This is, structurally, a party. It's also, structurally, the oldest dating event in human history. The specific dances have changed. The music has changed. The food has changed. The fundamental social technology of putting unattached people in the same space with permission to assess each other has not changed at all. Now here's where it gets interesting. What were ancient humans actually looking for? Not what we think they were looking for. The standard assumption is that prehistoric mate selection was purely about physical fitness. Strongest hunter, most fertile female, maximum survival genes. End of story. The evidence says something more complicated. Studies of modern hunter-gatherer societies, the closest living analogues to prehistoric social structure, consistently find that the most desirable partners are not the physically strongest individuals. They are the most skilled. They are the most generous. And they are the best
Within weeks,
storytellers.
everyone knows.
Storytelling. In multiple independent studies of different hunter-gatherer groups, the ability to tell compelling stories correlated with higher social status and more mating success. Which means that the skill that eventually produced Shakespeare, stand-up comedy, YouTube, and the podcast you listen to while doing dishes has been sexually selected for since before Homo sapiens existed. The human brain didn't evolve a love of narrative by accident. It evolved because
We
the
must
people
work
who
together.
could tell good stories had more children. Let's talk about what men were actually evaluated on. Not size, not aggression, not who could beat up whom. Hunting success, but specifically how you handled hunting failure. Because in hunter-gatherer societies, hunting failed constantly. Big game hunts succeed maybe 20% of the time. The question wasn't whether you were a good hunter. The question was what you were like when you came home empty-handed 3 days in a row. Did you blame everyone around you? Did you get angry? Did you give up? Or did you stay calm, share whatever others had brought in, and get up the next morning? This is what women in observed hunter-gatherer groups consistently report valuing. Not strength, not dominance, emotional reliability. The capacity to be useful when things go wrong. Which is, it turns out, exactly what women in modern societies report valuing when you actually ask them. The list has not changed in 100,000 years. We just have worse ways of detecting it now. Here's the part nobody talks about. Ancient human women had considerably more agency in mate selection than the club dragging cartoon suggests. In the vast majority of observed hunter-gatherer societies, marriage requires consent from both parties. Women can and do refuse. Women can and do end relationships. Divorce in hunter-gatherer societies is common, typically uncomplicated, and carries no stigma. The Hadza have a word that translates roughly to, the marriage is finished. And that's more or less the entire legal process. Women in small mobile groups also had something modern women often lack: an extremely well-informed social network. Every woman in the group knew every other woman's experience with every man. Information traveled instantly, constantly, and in detail. If a man was unreliable, unkind, or useless in a crisis, every woman of mating age knew about it within weeks. There was no hiding your personality behind a curated Instagram. Now let's talk about something that modern people almost never consider: attraction in a world with no mirrors. For most of human history, you had never seen your own face. Not really. Reflections in still water are blurry and brief. The first true reflective surfaces, polished metal, glass, are recent inventions. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans had no reliable way to know what they looked like to other people.
What this means is that self-presentation, the thing we now spend enormous energy on, the lighting, the angles, the outfits, the carefully worded bios, simply wasn't possible in the way we think about it. What you presented to potential partners was your behavior, how you moved, how you spoke, how you treated people, how you handled difficulty, how you smelled, which was extremely relevant and mostly beyond your control. Smell was not a minor factor in prehistoric mate selection. Humans, like most mammals, have a chemosensory system that provides information about genetic compatibility, immune function, and health status through body odor. Studies show that people rate the scent of individuals with different immune genes as more attractive. This system was shaped by millions of years of evolution. It was calibrated and functional. Then we invented deodorant and largely turned it off. Let's talk about what happened after you found someone. In most hunter-gatherer societies, the concept of a formal proposal didn't exist. Pair formation was typically gradual and social. Two people spent more time together. They started sharing food, which in a world where food was never guaranteed was an act of considerable significance. The group noticed. The group acknowledged it. And at some point, the acknowledgement became official without any single moment of decision. There was no down on one knee moment. There was no ring. There was just a slow public commitment made visible through shared meals and shared sleeping arrangements, and the eventual understanding of everyone around you that these two people were now a unit. In some societies, there were formal ceremonies. In many, there weren't. What there always was, across every hunter-gatherer culture ever studied, was a social recognition by the group. Your relationship existed because the people around you acknowledged it existed. Privacy, in the modern sense, simply wasn't available. Your relationship was always, in some sense, a community matter. Here's what the comparison actually shows. Ancient humans didn't have Tinder, but they had something Tinder cannot provide. They had years of observed behavior before any commitment. They had dense social networks that filtered out bad actors automatically. They had mutual accountability. Both parties embedded in the same community, unable to simply disappear. They had physical proximity that meant compatibility wasn't performed, it was demonstrated daily. We built dating apps to solve the problem of finding people. Ancient humans were never solving that problem. They were solving a different problem. Figuring out which of the people they already knew was the right one. And for that problem, their system was arguably better. The romantic comedies have it backwards. We think ancient love was brutal and simple, and we've made it sophisticated and intentional. What actually happened is that ancient love was embedded in deep social context and long observation and genuine knowledge of the other person. And we've replaced that with a photograph, a sentence about tacos, and the hope that whoever shows up is who they claimed to be online. The ancient humans standing awkwardly at a seasonal gathering, trying to demonstrate their hunting stories and emotional reliability to someone from a neighboring band, was doing something genuinely difficult. But at least they knew what they were working with.